I never believed the woods could steal you away, until the day I almost vanished. I consider myself a seasoned hiker. That crisp autumn afternoon, I set out for Blackwood Reserve, a forest whispered about on hiking forums for its strange disappearances. My journey began like any other, a clear trail, my trusty map, and a steady pace. But a few hours in, I encountered something that made my heart skip a beat. A lone, abandoned hiking bag lying on the trail. It was odd enough to pause, but I remembered similar posts online, so I picked it up briefly, hoping to return it later if someone reported it missing. I left it where I found it and pressed on, unaware that my own path was about to twist into something inexplicable. A short while later, I noticed that my GPS was acting erratically. Landmarks I'd passed moments before were nowhere to be seen. I tried to retrace my steps, but the trail seemed to have been erased, leaving me with nothing but a gnawing sense of unease. I attempted a quick call for help, only to find my phone completely dead. Panic was starting to seep in when, out of nowhere, I experienced something that defies explanation. A split second when time itself seemed to pause. I was walking then. Everything went blank. When I came to, I found myself on a narrow, unfamiliar path. I distinctly remembered stepping off the main trail, yet I couldn't recall the transition. In that disorienting moment, I felt as if I had been pulled away and then returned, like a glitch in reality. I pressed forward, determined to find an exit, but soon began noticing inexplicable details. There were broken branches arranged deliberately along the path, and, more disturbingly, footprints that weren't my own. Then, in the midst of my mounting dread, I heard a voice, a clear, almost familiar whisper calling my name. Marcus. I froze. It wasn't a recording or an echo. It felt like someone was speaking directly to me. I strained my ears, trying to decipher the source, but the voice faded into silence almost as quickly as it came. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I followed the faint sound. Soon, I reached a small clearing and discovered something even more chilling. A discarded water bottle emblazoned with my initials. I was sure I had packed that bottle before setting off. Confusion swirled within me. I retraced my steps again, only to find the trail had completely vanished. I was alone, truly lost, and the forest seemed determined to toy with my mind. In a desperate bid for answers, I rummaged through my bag for a compass. With trembling hands, I followed a barely visible signpost that pointed toward a ranger station near the forest's edge. Every step felt like a struggle against an unseen force. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I emerged at the station, exhausted and shaken. The rangers listened intently as I recounted my bizarre ordeal. They mentioned that similar stories had been reported by other hikers, though no one had ever found a definitive explanation. I left Blackwood Reserve with more questions than answers, and with the unsettling knowledge that, for a brief moment, I had almost been swallowed by the woods. Even now, when I lie awake at night, I wonder if that forest still holds secrets that could claim another lost soul, or if I was merely caught in an inexplicable twist of fate.
I never expected a peaceful retreat to become my worst nightmare. I had been eagerly anticipating a weekend escape with my closest friends, seeking a break from the relentless pace of city life. We rented an old cabin deep in the woods, a secluded spot whispered about on obscure forums for its mysterious past and unexplained happenings. The drive up was filled with excitement and laughter, but the moment we arrived at the cabin, an unsettling feeling crept over me. The cabin was modest and isolated, its wooden exterior worn by years of neglect. My friends brushed off my uneasy thoughts as mere nerves. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night, we gathered in the cramped living room, sharing stories and toasting with cheap wine. While the laughter was genuine, I found myself glancing repeatedly toward the dark windows, half expecting to see a shadow moving by. As midnight approached, a heavy silence fell over the room. I lay in my small bedroom, trying to calm my racing mind, when I heard a soft, rhythmic tapping at the door. I assumed one of my friends was trying to wake me, so I murmured, "It's just the wind, right?" But the tapping grew louder and more insistent with each passing minute. With trembling hands, I crept to the door and slowly opened it, only to be met by the inky darkness of the forest. My heart pounded as I closed the door, whispering to myself that it must be my imagination. Unable to return to sleep, I wandered into the living room, where my friends appeared just as unsettled. One of them mentioned catching a glimpse of a figure moving past the window, while another recalled hearing a soft, disembodied whisper. The conversation grew tense until, in a dusty corner beneath a stack of old magazines, we discovered a weathered journal. Its pages chronicled the tragic history of the cabin, tales of a family that mysteriously vanished and strange phenomena reported by previous occupants. Fueled by a mix of fear and curiosity, we decided to investigate further. I volunteered to explore the area around the cabin, hoping to find a clue that might explain the unsettling events. Armed with only a flashlight and a pounding heart, I stepped out into the cold, silent night. The forest, usually alive with nocturnal sounds, was eerily mute, as if nature itself was holding its breath. I soon discovered a narrow trail leading away from the cabin. As I followed it, I came upon a series of odd carvings etched into the bark of an ancient tree. The symbols were strikingly similar to a drawing in the journal. My hands trembled as I traced the markings, each stroke igniting a sense of dread, as if I were brushing against remnants of a long-forgotten curse. The trail looped back to the cabin, yet I returned feeling irrevocably changed, burdened by the weight of an inexplicable presence. Back inside, I recounted my findings to my friends. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken terror, and we agreed that staying any longer might be a mistake. At first light, we hastily packed our belongings and left, the cabin receding into the dark embrace of the woods behind us. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the lingering feeling that we had disturbed something ancient, a secret too dark to be left forgotten. Even now, when I lie awake at night, I remember that haunting weekend at the cabin. I still wonder if the curse of that secluded retreat will ever be lifted, or if its dark secrets will continue to lure unsuspecting souls into its grasp.
I used to find solace in the quiet of the forest until the whispers began. I have spent years as a park ranger at Alderwood Park, a place where I believed I understood every sound and shadow. On one seemingly ordinary night, while patrolling a remote section of the forest, I encountered something I cannot easily explain. I had been on a routine patrol, checking the boundaries and ensuring that no one was trespassing when I first heard it. At first, it was a faint murmur, like the rustle of leaves carried by a gentle breeze. But as I ventured deeper along a seldom-used logging trail, the sound grew steadily louder, a soft, almost pleading whisper that seemed to come from the very heart of the trees. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding, as I strained to listen. There it was again, a barely audible, desperate plea, "Help me." I dismissed the idea that it was simply the wind. Instead, I noted that the voice seemed to originate from a dense thicket where the trees huddled together. With cautious steps, I moved closer, my flashlight trembling in my hand. Every footstep echoed in the silence of the night, each step heightening the tension. I pulled out my recorder, determined to capture this inexplicable occurrence. The moment I pressed record, the whispers grew clearer, layered voices overlapping in a way that defied explanation. I could just make out fragments of words: lost, alone, and chillingly, my own name. My blood ran cold. The familiarity of the voice struck me as deeply personal, as though someone who knew me intimately was calling out from the dark. Compelled by a mix of fear and duty, I edged closer to the source. The dense cluster of trees showed nothing out of the ordinary, only their gnarled trunks and swaying branches were visible. Yet the voices persisted. I called out, "Hello? Who's there?" My voice broke the stillness, only to be swallowed by the oppressive quiet. I waited for an answer, but the silence that followed was more unnerving than any reply could have been. Then, as I turned to leave, I heard a soft murmur right behind me. I spun around, flashlight scanning the darkness, but found no one. The feeling of being watched intensified. I retraced my steps along the logging trail, yet the path, which I had known for years, now seemed altered, as if the forest had rearranged itself in the darkness. My recorder captured one final, fragmented message before it abruptly cut off, a desperate plea and a low, anguished sigh that sent shivers down my spine. I clutched the device, my hands trembling, struggling to comprehend what I had just experienced. The next morning, I listened to the recording. The voices were unmistakable, clear yet haunting, embedded within the static of the night. I cross-referenced old patrol logs and local legends, learning that years ago, a tragic accident on that very trail had claimed the lives of several loggers. Some locals believed that their restless spirits still roamed Alderwood, their voices echoing through the trees in moments of despair. I began to wonder if the experience was merely a trick of my mind, or if I had indeed stumbled upon the lingering echoes of a past tragedy. Even now, every time I patrol Alderwood Park, I listen intently for that eerie chorus, half expecting to hear my name whispered on the wind. That night changed me, leaving me with more questions than answers, and a persistent sense that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The forest still holds its secrets close, and I am left wondering if I will ever escape the echoes of those sorrowful voices.
I had walked that trail countless times until the day it betrayed me. I had been looking forward to my usual weekend hike along Raven's Trail, a route I knew like the back of my hand. It was my haven, a familiar path where I could clear my mind. That morning, the sun was just peeking over the treetops, and I set off with the confidence of routine. But within minutes, something felt distinctly different. The trail, which had always been clearly marked, seemed to twist and shift in ways I hadn't noticed before. As I progressed, I began to see subtle discrepancies. A large boulder that I used to pass by was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the path forked unexpectedly, with one branch leading into a dense thicket and the other disappearing into an area that felt unnervingly silent. I chose the main route, trusting my instincts, but a gnawing uncertainty took root in my mind. Before long, the familiar markers, an old wooden sign and a distinctive rock formation, had vanished altogether. I pulled out my phone to check the map, but the signal was dead, and the screen only displayed a patchwork of the surrounding forest. I tried to reassure myself, thinking I was simply disoriented. Yet, as I walked further, the silence of the forest grew heavier, and every step felt like I was stepping into a different world. I soon reached a clearing that I had never seen before. In the middle stood what appeared to be the remnants of an old settlement, crumbling stone walls, overgrown with ivy, and broken windows that whispered of past lives. My heart pounded as I stepped closer, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. This was not part of the usual Raven's Trail, and I wondered how I could have never noticed it in all my years of hiking. Compelled by curiosity and a sense of foreboding, I ventured into the ruins. Among the debris, I found old tattered photographs and a rusted sign that read, "Welcome to Elmwood." The faded images depicted a bustling town, now a ghostly relic of time. I recalled local legends about Elmwood, a town that had vanished mysteriously decades ago, leaving behind a curse that haunted the land. Was it possible that Raven's Trail had merged with Elmwood's forgotten pathways? The deeper I wandered into the ruins, the more I felt that unseen eyes were watching me. At one point, I heard a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, a voice that seemed to say, "Don't leave." I froze, scanning the shadows for a source, but saw nothing. My pulse quickened as I realized I was not alone, yet I remained unable to determine if it was a trick of the wind or something more sinister. Desperate to find my way back to the familiar path, I retraced my steps, but the ruins seemed to close in, blurring the boundaries between the old and the new trail. Every turn led to more uncertainty. The more I searched, the more the trail seemed to be deliberately misleading me, as if it had a will of its own. Finally, after what felt like hours, I stumbled upon a faint signpost, barely visible under layers of moss pointing toward the known section of Raven's Trail. I hurried along, my steps quick and erratic, until at last I recognized a familiar landmark. I emerged from the woods, shaken and breathless, with the memory of those haunted ruins and eerie whispers forever etched into my mind. Even now, I can't help but wonder if the trail was cursed, deliberately ensnaring me to reveal the forgotten past of Elmwood. I still find myself glancing back over my shoulder whenever I pass that stretch of forest, haunted by the possibility that the path might one day betray me again.
I remember that night clearly, the night when the howls shattered the silence of the woods. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip in the remote stretches of Shadowpine Forest, a place I had visited before without incident. My friends and I pitched our tents under a vast starlit sky and gathered around a crackling campfire, sharing laughs and ghost stories. As the fire burned low, an eerie calm settled over us, and I felt an inexplicable chill run down my spine. At midnight, while most of my friends were dozing in their tents, I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The cool night air was crisp, and the forest around me was cloaked in deep shadows. Suddenly, a low, mournful howl echoed through the trees, a sound that was not quite animalistic. My heart pounded as I strained to locate its source. I took a tentative step forward, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand, and that's when I heard it again. The howls grew louder, layered with other sounds, as if multiple voices were calling out in anguish. I paused, listening intently. There was a rhythm to the cries, a pattern that felt almost like a message. "Who's there?" I whispered into the darkness, my voice barely audible. The forest responded with a series of howls, punctuated by the rustle of leaves and the snap of a branch. I felt a strange compulsion to follow the sound, as if it were leading me somewhere important. Against my better judgment, I began to walk deeper into the woods, each step measured and hesitant. The deeper I ventured, the more oppressive the darkness became. The beam of my flashlight cut weakly through the gloom, revealing fleeting shapes that darted between the trees. I could feel unseen eyes watching me from every direction. My mind raced with thoughts of local legends, stories of lost souls and mysterious creatures that roamed Shadowpine when the moon was high. As I pressed on, the howls seemed to draw closer, almost as if they were circling around me. After what felt like an eternity, I reached a small clearing. There in the center lay a series of enormous, unidentifiable footprints pressed into the soft earth. The prints were too large and oddly shaped to belong to any animal I recognized. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized I might be witnessing something supernatural. I crouched down, examining the prints, when suddenly a piercing howl erupted from the darkness behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but saw nothing except the dense shadow of the forest. I retraced my steps, my pace quickening as panic set in. The howls followed me, echoing in the trees, growing louder with each passing moment. I could hear my friends stirring in the distance, but I was too overwhelmed to call out. Finally, I burst through the tree line and back to the campsite, my body trembling and my mind reeling. I told my friends what I had experienced, though their expressions mingled disbelief and concern. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy, I reviewed my memory with a mix of terror and fascination. I later learned that similar accounts of eerie howls and strange footprints had been reported in Shadowpine Forest for decades. No one had ever offered a definitive explanation, leaving the mystery shrouded in legend. Even now, when I pass near the forest, I can still hear that haunting call echo in my mind, a reminder of a night when the woods whispered secrets that I can never forget.